Welcome back to the Life Legacy Podcast, and this is part 2 of our beautiful story with Jody Hazen. If you guys have not been fortunate enough to listen to the first episode, it was spectacular. She dives into the grief journey and what that has been like in her life and what it's like to lose a child, and she has really beautiful insights that helps you really know some good ways to move forward in such a hard moment, in such a hard journey, in finding the greatness in it. And speaking of that, that was part of the intro, I guess. And second part is Jody is just a beautiful light to the world and someone that is loved by many. And you've heard she went through that grief journey, but there was more ready for her plate, and that just shows how prepared she was with God, knowing or not that she can take on a lot of things. And so
Thanks, Jeff.
Today we're going to dive into more of the medical side of trials, and she'll help us kind of realize what life is like going through medical trials. And so I'm going to welcome Jody to the podcast.
Thanks, Jaxon.
Yeah. So we'll kind of catch up right to where we were at in the last episode. Talked about the beautiful life of Riker Hazen and all the inspiration. Riker had over 6 kids named after him after he passed. And so a lot of family members will always talk very highly of someone that has passed. But Riker is like a divine soul that has altered the world in many shapes and forms. And so I highly suggest learning about that. And so let's dive into, it'd been about a year since he passed.
Riker passed away April 2018, and August 2019 is when I realized I had breast cancer. And so a year and 3 or 4 months is all.
Okay, well, let's dive into it. Tell me that day, that story.
My husband was out of town, and it's like any other trauma, I guess. You don't really know how you'll react, and sometimes you go back and go, yeah, I maybe didn't handle that the best. And I probably look back and think I maybe didn't handle that day the best, but my husband was out of town. Luckily, my daughter had slept overnight, and it was actually probably 1 a.m. And I just brushed as I went to go to sleep, and I felt a big lump, but it was about this big, size of the lump. And like I said, you don't know how you'll react. I literally didn't have a thought except for to yell, and I yelled at my daughter. I said, "McCall," woke her up, "get in here right now." Most mothers would not do that. But McCall and I are pretty close, and I just said, "Come here. You're not going to believe this," because there was just no denying. A lot of times what had ended up happening was I had a lump that grew behind my chest wall. And so because it grew behind my chest wall, I hadn't felt it. And so I didn't feel it till it had moved forward. So by the time I'd felt it, it was quite large. I think I can't remember the centimeters, so I won't say it. But anyway, so from then on, from there, we just got an appointment to go have a mammogram, had a mammogram. And then because of what that showed, they send you to have a diagnostic mammogram. And then they look at the diagnostic mammogram, and then they just move you down the line and continue. So they found it when I had the diagnostic mammogram. Odd little story with that was I was in there having the mammogram, and the tech was there, and I said, how many, this is good to know, kind of, I said, how many lumps and mammograms with problems that you see end up being cancer? And she said 80% of people that come in it are cysts. And so that made me feel better, and I said, oh, really? And so then she said, and I had had my mammogram a year and 3 months earlier. I had been really careful about having my mammograms, which if I could say anything, it would be have your mammograms, especially if you have history in your family. My mom and my grandma both had breast cancer, and so I had been very much vigilant about having them every year. But because of Riker's death and everything, it had been a year and 3 months. But so anyway, she said, well, I'm looking at your mammogram a year and a half ago and here. And she said, you have nothing a year ago. So unless you have some really fast growing cancer, it's a cyst. And so I went in thinking it was a cyst because she had said that. And this cute little tech, I feel so bad for her because after they got it back, they sent me in to have an ultrasound. And so I went in to have an ultrasound, and I didn't bring my husband. That's another thing that I didn't do very well. I'd worked at the hospital for 20 years, but I had worked there 20 years earlier, from my 20s to my 40s. And so I told my husband, he said he was coming with me, and I said, they're just going to call you. I'm going to have an ultrasound, then they'll call you with the results. 2020, they don't call now. They can find it and just tell you. So anyway, that was a bad one because I was alone. So I was alone. I went to have my ultrasound, and a story I tell, during my trauma with Riker, my son passed away, it kind of manifested physically with, I would get the shakes and the shivers, and my teeth would chatter often in the middle of the day or in the middle of the night. It just was a trauma response. So I laid down to have my ultrasound, and the lady put some gel on me. It was warm, and my teeth just started to chatter, and I started to do that shaky thing. And she said, oh my gosh, I'm sorry, are you cold? And it was an instant moment like, oh my goodness, this is my body reacting to trauma. And I knew right then, I have breast cancer. And one moment before that, I had really thought that it was a cyst. So I just looked at her and I said, no, but I'm just going to close my eyes through this. And I just closed my eyes, and I knew that it was breast cancer. And so then a doctor comes in, and I'll just tell you this because I think it's kind of interesting. I didn't know how it went down before I had cancer. And after the ultrasound, I sat in a room, and the doctor came in, and he kind of leaned forward and put his hand on his chest. And I'm like, okay, this isn't good. So I just said, hold on. I mean, I kind of knew anyway. And I said, can I call my husband? So poor Bruce was on the speakerphone.
Oh my
And I was
gosh.
just there. And he told me that he was, pretty positive that it was breast cancer, that it was a cyst because it was so large. From there, you literally go straight from there. And they said, we're going to get you set up for a biopsy and an MRI.
Yeah.
And if that shows anything, then we'll have a PET scan.
So
and you are just freaking out.
I was gonna say, like, some doctor, like Grey's Anatomy, is telling you have cancer. Like, what is going through your mind?
It feels like a bomb goes off in your mind, honestly. Completely different than grief, but you run through every scenario and everything you've ever heard about cancer and breast cancer, and what is this going to take? And you truly know very little. I don't know very much about cancer. I didn't know anything at the time, but it is like a bomb goes off, and you don't hardly have time to process it, really. They're really cute. They took me out of the ultrasound room to get changed, and all the nurses line up on the wall. It's very sweet. And they just to give you support, and this cute little tech was there, and she just was, I'm so sorry. And I said, it's okay. But it was very tender. And then they walk you, and then there's a waiting room, and there's 4 or 5 ladies there with their robes on waiting for their mammograms. And I thought, oh my gosh, I'm one of the few that does this. And so I just told them, this is why you get it. And then they said, I'll give you a minute in the dressing room. So I had a moment to myself to say a prayer and ask for some strength to figure this out. And I felt terrible that Bruce wasn't there, but it is what it is. So then I walked out, and
So
they took over.
while you're in that room, like you're saying that prayer, really what's like going on in your mind?
I don't have a huge recollection of exactly what I was thinking, except I do remember thinking, I cannot tell my kids I have breast cancer. That is what I remember saying to God and Jesus. Please don't make me tell my kids. We just had the worst day of our life a year and a half ago, and I can't have them have to worry about me and that fear. That's a mom again. It was just kind of all about them. Like, I just don't want to tell anyone. I just don't want to tell anyone if this is real. But mostly you are just in shock. It is adrenaline, and I have said it before. I walked in, I opened the door to to the hospital, and I walked in that door, and you walk out a different person, and you never get to go back to what you were before. That door is opened, and you're now in a different place, and you don't. It's just like with Riker, you never go back to being the person you were before.
So how is this door different from your grief door?
Completely different.
Yeah.
I didn't scream. I didn't wail. It was pure shock, but a physical shock. It was physical. That was completely emotional, and this was physical. I mean, I think it was emotional to a degree, but at the time, you don't know what you're up against for sure. You don't know what it really means. You're listening to doctor terms. He's showing you, a video of how big it is and centimeters and it's terminology you've never heard before. So you're kind of just in shock and just you're listening, but you're not listening. You're going through do I have to have chemo? Wait, do you have radiate? Okay, wait, am I going to be bald? Oh my gosh. Wait, I mean, you're kind of doing all of that while he's talking. And yeah, then they take you right in. It's a really cool setup. They have everything right there. They take you straight from there. You get set up for an MRI, and then you get set up for or a biopsy and an MRI. So I think the biggest thing that was surprising to me was your life changes that moment. I mean, I went to work one more day. I went to work and said, I have cancer. I'm out. I now have 4 appointments a week. You enter a cancer world, and it's something you've never entered before. It's just the hospital world. I hate still to this day. I just had a bone scan 2 weeks ago, and I'm triggered. I walk in there and I'm like, not going in this world, out of this world. I'm out. Don't keep me. It's very much like, I think it's just like any other world, like the grief world or addiction world or, worlds you don't know anything about. And then you all of a sudden I don't know anything about in the adoption world that people are in or infertility or there's so many challenges that people have. And now I just realize I'm just one of many. Mine just happened to be visible for people to know about. And they also can share love with me in a greater way. Yeah. I did think that too. I thought, I cannot tell anyone in my neighborhood. I have had so much love in the last year that I'm going to die with the love. It's true. So anyway, then what happens is they call you. They called us 3 days later. We were having a neighborhood party, and my primary care doctor called me because they had called him, and he happens to be a neighbor of mine. And so we had just had a big BYU U of U neighborhood party, and I hadn't told anybody, none of my kids. And Bruce and I just went in the bedroom or in the kitchen and listened to Dr. Shelby tell me the truth. So
what did he say?
You definitely have cancer, and they've set you up for an MRI. I'd had the biopsy then. Your MRI is not here, and then they'll do a PET scan. The MRI tells you how big it is and what stage it is, or how big it is. The PET scan tells you if it has spread or not. So anyway, the cool thing is Bruce and I we'd planned a motorcycle trip, so we went to on a big motorcycle trip.
I gotta pause you. So versus the first time to the second time, was there any difference in what you experienced hearing the news from like, all right, this looks like it's cancer to like, hey, you have cancer?
No, because I knew I had cancer when my teeth started chattering. Oh. I know that God gave me that little bit. I think he gave that to me because it was like, oh, sorry. Guess what? Gear up. Yeah. Pull your big girl pants on. Here we go. I knew that. I knew even when he called me. I will tell you though, my son's an MRI tech. I had to go have an MRI. That I was so nervous about. I learned a lot about, I think, from the grief. I had become very intuitive. I had become aware of my emotions and my thoughts and very mindful. And I began doing, I'd had to do some meditations to help me sleep during the grief process. I feel like I was guided to a lot of different things during grief that were already in place. So I went in to do the MRI. I brought 2 or 3 things of Rikers and put them in my locker. I walked in with a prayer in my heart saying, I will not make it through an MRI. I will not make it emotionally through an MRI. I knew it would be a huge trigger.
And why would that be a huge trigger?
Because I had sat with Riker as he did MRIs. His cute little clinic was so nice. I'd go visit him in Phoenix, and they'd let me go back with him. I couldn't see the names of the patients or anything, but I'd sit with Riker as he did MRIs. I watched him go in and help people and listen to him and how he communicated love when they would get claustrophobic, and he'd go in Spanish, calm their nerves, and all of that. And so I knew I was so afraid of that.
So is it like a sacred space at this point, or is it more like trauma?
I was more anxious. I had some anxiety. I walked out. My kids all went with me, my 2 kids and my husband, and I walked out. They all had One Soul t-shirts on from the charity. None of them had planned that. I had a One Soul t-shirt on because, I knew I was getting an MRI. So we all knew that would be a thing. But I shut the locker and I knelt down in that little locker room. And I just said, this can go one of 2 ways. And I just prayed for a beautiful experience. I asked for, it to be not grief triggering. And it ended up being just that. My 2 experiences that would usually cause the most anxiety, I know that God, Riker, Jesus got me through. Because instead, when the lady would say, how you doing in there? Hang on, because it's 45 minutes. I get claustrophobic. I don't love an MRI. I could hear Riker saying those things, and it was sweet and peaceful, and I came away kind of in shock that it was an okay experience. The next one wasn't so great, the PET scan. So then you know that you have cancer, you have breast cancer. Then you have a PET scan to see if it has spread through your body. If it has not spread through your body, you're like stage 1, stage 2. Your chemo's a little different. You have less of a chance of recurrence. If it has spread into your body, then if you're stage 3, they can cure it and you can have treatment. If it's stage 4 and has spread throughout your body, then you manage it for the rest of your life. You just control it. I did not want stage 4. Yeah. I knew in my mind, I am not going to manage cancer for the rest of my life. I prayed. That was probably my highest anxiety day I've had since Riker, was the PET scan day. They take you in for a PET scan. This is interesting for people that have never had cancer. I had no idea they did this. They took me to a room in the dark, and they said, we don't want you to get any stimulus because the stimulus will light up your cells. So what the PET scan do is it lights up all the cells in your body, and some are cancerous. So for 45 minutes, they put dye in you, and you sit in a dark room by yourself, trying not to have any stimulus. With so much anxiety.
Oh my gosh.
I had so much, because I can't have stage 4 cancer.
It's like,
please.
Hey, I have to go through a car accident and you're going to run into this wall, but just stay really calm.
Yeah.
It's like, are you kidding me? That's your ask right now?
It was, that was one of the most odd days of my cancer journey. I sat there and my heart started beating, and I'm getting this a little bit now, this little adrenaline. I thought, oh my gosh, I'm not going to make it. Oh my gosh. They ask you, try not to look at your phone because they don't want any of that. And I was like, oh my gosh. So then I started being mindful and doing meditation, weird things like, I don't even know. I can't even tell you. Just weird little mindful statements and things in my mind to calm me down. And then I started singing. If you want the truth, I started singing I'm an Overcomer by Mandisa. If you're in the cancer journey, go to YouTube and go to Mandisa, I think, from American Idol. It's called I'm an Overcomer, and it shows Robin. from the Today Show who had cancer. It shows a couple of people that have cancer to this, and I'd watched it. So I started singing. I'm an overcome. I mean, I was losing my mind. So I'm singing, and the guy opens the door, and I went, I'm sorry, I'm singing. And he looked at me and he goes, "You're singing?" He didn't even hear me. He just opened the door to check on me. I was like, maybe I was singing. He was like, "Well, that's new." Anyway, so from there, I want you to know that I thought, oh, this isn't going to go well, the PET scan and my mind. And so I said, what am I going to do here? Because the PET scan's about an hour. And so I decided from some of my mindfulness journey with grief that I would have the PET scan. And as I went, I would start with my mom and dad. And I would just go through what I loved about each one of them and take a few minutes and just focus my mind on my mom, my dad, my husband, Trevor. And I just thought, I'm just going to go through 4 or 5 sentences of gratitude of what I love about them because of the support that they had given me through the last year and a half. And I'm not kidding. I got done and I was laying there and I was on Cooper, my baby. And I opened my eyes and I saw the ceiling, and it had taken me an hour, and it was the exact time that I was done, and I had not any anxiety. I had just got through that with some true mindfulness, and I thought, wow, some of this holistic stuff works, and I became more of a believer in some of the naturopathic ways. I tried to do some of both in my journey, but I will have to defend. This is the good part. I was great. And then I got out and I looked up, and it was like the Wizard of Oz because the lady was above there. She was kind of the PET scan lady. And I thought, oh, she knows. She knows what's in my body. And I was looking at her going, oh, she knows. She knows. And all the anxiety came back. And I thought, oh my gosh. And I walked out.
Because the answer is 1 foot away from you right now.
And I was like, oh gosh. And I walked out and my sister was there. She had driven down to sit with Bruce from Salt Lake. And she was in her scrubs. And I walked out and I was like, oh, I am so anxious. And it was just so sweet. And of course she was there. She'd been with me for a year and a half. And that was such a sweet. And then I ran into another one of my friends. And then that night, they called and said that it was stage 3. It had gone into 9 of my nodes, but it hadn't gone through my body. So it was stage 3. I could do some treatments and cure it. Yeah. Long story to get you to there. But that's a weird cancer journey. So that's a weird beginning.
That's the opening to this new world. And I think you hit on something that is like a giant lesson that maybe some people might have missed. But she is going into the most intense traumatic experience, finding out like if she's going to die from cancer or not, right? And she's taking a 45-minute MRI, which is triggering because her son that passed did MRIs with her all around. And so all in all, just like the most hectic situation to be in. And she did something from the start of that to the end that gave her complete peace and made all the negative leave. And from what I understand is you brought gratitude to your mind and to your body in the worst moment, other than Riker, that you've gone through to that point. And that was the alteration of your entire body. And so for 45 minutes,
it changed.
It changed everything.
Absolutely.
So what's the lesson there? Is that whatever you're going through, literally, this is like like an average. This isn't like a middle hard trial thing. This is horrible. And she was able to find peace and stay calm in the most horrific state because she chose gratitude. And she chose to be in a positive state when 99% of the world that would ever have to go through that would be losing their absolute mind. And you, from past trauma, you have learned how to bring gratitude. And so
Yeah.
I think that's such a big lesson that could totally be missed. And so I just had to hit on that. But
Thank you. I think it was like, it felt more out of
yeah.
desperation, but I
Yeah.
think it also was from being so still the year before,
Yeah.
and learning how to quiet my mind from the grief.
Yeah.
It was a big thing that was very hard for me to quiet my mind. Sleeping, waking up, trying to figure out how to focus and not have your mind spin. So I think I knew that it was going to be bad.
Yeah.
And I had to come up with it. And singing I'm an Overcomer really hadn't worked. Tried that one. It hadn't worked.
Yeah.
Anyway.
Hey, but the fact that you're trying and not just being a victim to the circumstances, telling of your character, right? And that's where it's like God knows that you can handle hard stuff and you're going to fight the fight, right?
Yep.
And something we got to talk about too is you brought up, the doctor tells you that there's a really good chance you have cancer. And then from there to finding out for sure that you have cancer, there's a moment when you had to talk with your family.
Yeah.
I want to know how that went down. Yeah.
Yeah. I have a little place I go. I think lots of people have places they go, whether it's the mountains or your bedroom or your own hallowed holy place. And so I went to my holy place that I had walked many times during the grief process that morning.
What's your holy place?
It's the Parkway. I go to the Parkway. It's just there's a couple. I have 2 or 3 by my house that I like to go hike and walk and run and not run, no running, walking. But yeah, so of course I just went there in the morning. Bruce and I were the only ones that knew at that time. And I walked the Parkway and, literally just prayed for the right words and a way to be honest and authentic with my kids, but to still also help them to not have fear. And I think what happens so often for me is, so I walked the Parkway that whole time. It was about an hour and a half, listening to things here and there, but mostly silence. And I know it's dumb and it seems cliche, but right as I was coming out, a friend texted me at that moment and just said, hey, I listened to the song, which it's Lauren Daigle's I Will Rescue You. 5 years ago it was newer. Now everyone knows it. I had never heard it. But the fact that it was at that moment that she texted me and I turned on that song and every word of that song just touched my soul. And I know the spot I was standing in and I just stood there and just listened to that song, I Will Rescue You. And that's when I was like, okay, he knows. He knows I'm going to do this and we're going to just do this. But he's got me. And it was just, so I just think you get a moment. You don't get it all the time. I'm not walking with Jesus every second of my life. I'm not, I try, but I'm not having spiritual experiences every second. But when the timing is exactly right, it's like God signs his name to it. And I had just done that and I was standing there and she happens to text me this song. That's a moment that I believe God signed his name to say, I will rescue you. You send out your SOS and I'll rescue you. And so, I told my kids and it's rough. It was rough. It was mostly rough for my daughter for me. It was rough for my boys too, but I think mostly for my daughter because it's scary.
Yeah.
You don't want to lose your mom.
What was the setting?
I can hardly remember where I was. Isn't that weird? I remember the conversations super well. I think it was in my house. I think they were both in my house. My sister, I went and I remembered my sister Jackie, the one that had come at the very beginning when I first told her I had breast cancer. I pulled up and said, come sit in my car. It was horrible. It's horrible. But I felt like I wanted to tell everybody.
Yeah.
But, we started out trying to be positive and we're going to do this and it's okay. We've been through a lot worse. I always say losing my child is paralyzing. Cancer is just annoying. But that's just perspective because I lost my child. Because it's really not. Cancer is hard and horrible, and I don't want to diminish it at all with anyone. But for me, I can get through cancer, but it's been harder, different hard.
Knowing the support of your kids, they've been awesome. I think they've been as good as you can get with crazy trials that they're also very involved in, right?
Yeah.
And so what were their responses?
They were good. They didn't fall apart. It was nothing like with Riker. It was big sighs, big deep breaths. Okay, mom. Okay. And it's also very unknown to them.
Yeah.
You're very ignorant in what that means at that time. And so we shared a little of what I was going to do. And we also said, we're not even sure. We're going to start right now. And you realize at that point, you know nothing. At that point, I'm going through, I went to 4 oncology appointments. My daughter came with me to every oncology. I wanted the right oncologist. Then you go to every surgeon that's going to do your mastectomy. I wanted the right surgeon. In my brain, I thought, if I have to have cancer, and if it does come back, and I want the doctor to walk me through this journey forever. So I was very intentional. Probably too intentional in picking my medical team. So there was a lot of appointments. And yeah.
What advice would you give on kind of going through picking the right doctor? Because I'm trying to remember, Tony Robbins talks about this, that the decision making for a doctor with the same exact problem, it varies. It's like 75% difference in what one doctor will say versus another. And so the importance of getting multiple views on your situation is crucial. And so what insight did you get while like learning from all these doctors?
The best thing that happened for me, I have a it's breast cancer, but it's estrogen positive, progesterone positive cancer, which is, the protocol is pretty much the same. Mm-hmm. That was really good for me to hear. The protocol was the same as far as chemo, radiation, because it was stage 3, because it was this kind of cancer. Huntsman Center protocol, same as IMC protocol. All the oncologists felt the same as far as what was going to happen. Surgeons had a little bit different. Some said a lumpectomy, some said a mastectomy.
What's the difference in those?
Lumpectomy, they just take the lump out, and actually the statistics are the same for recovery. So it's it's interesting because a lot of the statistics are the same, but you go with kind of your gut. And I chose a doctor. My daughter said, I cannot believe that he's the one you chose out of all the doctors. I thought I'd choose one that had good bedside manner. And I love my doctor. He has okay bedside manner, pretty good. Sorry, doctor. I'm not going to say who it is. No, I love him. But I chose him because he was a numbers guy. He knew what drugs caused what. He knew recurrence rate. Everything was a statistic or he knew every number. He was just this greatest guy.
That sounds like the guy.
And I was like, I like him. And my kids were like, really? Like, that's who you chose? Yeah, that was funny that I chose him. But yeah, and I really believe that I would tell somebody, go through it. If you want to go through a really long process of finding one, then do it. If you go, I'm not up for that. I don't know why I went that direction. That was the direction I went. And I ended up with really great doctors. And yeah, I'll tell you a funny story. So I went into my doctor to get my mastectomy. It's probably inappropriate, but I'll tell it anyway.
That's great.
So we go in, and I'm with my daughter because she went to every appointment with me, and my husband, and we're sitting there, and they bring me paperwork out. They said, before you go in to the plastic surgeon that's going to do your mastectomy, here's all the paperwork. So I'm signing this, and I'm doing this. This kind of tells you my state of mind. And I'm just signing it. And Bruce looks at me, and he's like, so how you doing with all this? And he was being the nicest husband. And I just looked at him and I said, well, Bruce, how would you be doing if you were signing a paper to go have your penis and your balls cut off? Sorry. And he just went, and my daughter goes, oh, touche, Dad. And I was just going through the motions, like, when you're a woman, and that's pretty crass, whatever. But when you're a woman, I think it's good to know that your hair, you're going to be bald, and your breasts are going to be. That's what makes you a woman.
That's tough.
And I think it's an added layer to cancer that's rude and mean. And why do they add this wonderful layer
your strips
to breast cancer? It's rough to add the emotional, psychological, physical part of that adds a layer. And I wanted him to not just see cancer as cancer, to go, you think, do this. And trust me, he thought of it in a different way.
Yeah.
From that moment on. And he loves that story. It's his great best story, because it's like, yeah, dude, this sucks.
This is what I'm dealing with.
This is not great right now. I'm not feeling really great about this. But here, let me sign my name. Anyway, that's just a funny story.
That's an amazing story.
Anyway, yeah.
Okay. And then, so you find out you have stage 3 breast cancer. Once again, you talk to your family about it. What's kind of like the next step? What's moving forward? And how are you doing?
So I had a mastectomy first. I decided to do a double mastectomy. I didn't want to have to deal with cancer coming back. I didn't want to. So for me, that was why I did that.
Scrape it out.
Just get it all off, so I don't want to have to deal with it. And there's a lot to that. Insurance doesn't pay for that unless you have, there was a big, huge fight with the insurance for me to do that, which is I'd like to get on a soapbox for the insurance companies, but I won't. But because I fought to have the insurance pay for both, because I didn't have the genetic. That's another thing. You have genetic testing. You have a bone scan. You have an echocardiogram. You have an EKG. You have all the stuff, because they need to make sure that how the chemo is going to react to your body. Yeah. It is a world of appointments and scans and tests. You get tattoos to mark yourself where and what. There are so many appointments. I literally got a calendar, my daughter and I, just to write down all the appointments, because it was mind-boggling. So anyway, then you have a mastectomy, and after your mastectomy, after 8 weeks, you have drains. You have 4 drains that you measure, and that's TMI. But guess what? Sometimes I think, well, I didn't know you had to have these drains that my poor husband has to measure every day. Yeah. It's not fun. So anyway, then you have, normally you would have 12 cancer. Well, you have 8 kind of intense chemo treatments, and then you have 12 or 4 and 12. I can't even remember what it is now. You have the 4 intense ones first. It might be 4 or 6, and then you have 12 weekly ones after that. Yeah. And so it literally went from August to the end of March was my chemo, and then I had radiation in May. So I just kept telling myself, it's a year. You just give it a year. I didn't realize at the time that you give it a lot more. Yeah. You were never going to go back the same after cancer. You're changed in good ways and bad ways, but your body doesn't go through. That's why people don't want to do chemo. Yeah. Your body can't go through that kind of intense.
So tell us a little bit, like, for example, I've never gone through chemo. Hopefully you never have to, right? Yeah. And I know a little bit just from your story and learning, but for someone that doesn't know anything about the chemo journey, what's kind of like a brief overview of that?
Quickly, it's a long process. The first time I went in for my first chemo, my blood levels weren't right. So because they weren't right, I hadn't even had an infusion yet. They said, come in 3 days, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, for 2.5 hours and get vancomycin to raise your levels. Well, that's not fun. Go down for 3 days just to get to where you can have chemo. That was new to me. There's always little glitches in your journey, most people. And so there's just a lot of time involved. And then for my first chemo, you just go. I was lucky. I chose a IMC. I chose an infusion center that was more private. That's why I went that direction, because I felt, because of my grief journey, I just wasn't up for a lot of social. Yeah. And I would have known my personality. I would want to talk to people and want to help and find out. And I just felt like I wanted to be more isolated. So I went to an infusion center that was isolated. And what they do is first you have blood work. You wait an hour and a half to make sure your blood work is fine before they'll give you the chemo. Then you have the chemo. It's 2-3 hour process of this big, mine was called the Red Devil. It just looked horrible. Big old huge needle and
The Red Devil.
fluid.
That's a great name to make
Yeah.
you feel.
I don't even know what it's called. I don't even know the real stuff.
Huh.
I know it's $7,000, so I don't think that's interesting. Anyway, they come in and they dress in hazmat uniform because they don't want to get any of this chemo on them. And I remember saying, really? You're dressed in a hazmat because you don't want any on you, but you're going to infuse it into my arm and into my body. That was the first realization that it was poison. It was poison. This chemo goes into your body, and the research has shown for my cancer that the chemo I took would kill all of your cells. It doesn't just kill the cancer cells, it kills all the cells in your body. And then at 29 hours, I had a little thing that was like an IV that they have figured out that at 29 hours, you better not go any lower. Your cells are dead. But at 29 hours, we're going to give you this little boost of Neulasta, whatever the heck that is, and that will build your cells back up. It'll kill the cancer cells, but it will build your regular cells back up. So that's kind of what it is. You kind of go for that day. The next day, you have 29 hours, you're pretty sick. And you're sick. Everybody's different, but I was sick for 4 or 5, 6 days, pretty sick, and then start to feel better. And then 10 days, every 10 days, you go and have another one.
So you did that for 7 months?
No, well, I did, yeah.
From
Well, I did
August to
that
March?
one. I did that one from November to March.
Okay.
November
Yeah.
to March. Yeah.
And
And you just kind of do that.
wow. And so then next is radiation.
Yeah. One thing about the chemo it was interesting to me too, that it is poison in your body, and your body innately wants to get that out. I thought that was beautiful. I thought it was beautiful that your body innately wants to heal. With that comes blood blisters in your mouth, all kinds of side effects. I happen to have really bad skin. If you can see, I have a lot of scars. I had big cold sores, kind of like scabs, because your body innately wants to get that out. So it comes out in different ways, and everybody has it manifest differently. And I was shocked. I'm like, what's this rash? What's going on? And he's like, oh, looks like you're going to be the skin one. You know, the skin's going to take it. I'm like, I look like I'm 80 years old now. I have crepey skin. It's like weird. That just happens to be my aftermath of cancer. So anyway, I had each of my kids go with me to a chemo treatment, and it was really special and really sweet, so that they could see what was happening and see other people that are going through that. I've said this before, I never look at a hospital the same now. I drive by hospitals and I see patients in those rooms, and I see doctors, and I see medical staff that have spent their life doing such good things for people, and I just don't see the building anymore. It's became very real to me, and the emotional part of people and the transformation that's taking place. I think, you walk in one way and you come out a totally different person because you're stripped. You're stripped. Your hair falls out. My doctor told me, Bruce said, well, is there a chance that her hair won't fall out? And he just started laughing. He said, I can tell you the day it's going to fall out. And we laughed at him. Well, we're sitting there and we were by an elevator. I don't even know where. And I said, well, it's the 13th day. And Bruce goes, yeah, let's see. And he grabbed my hair and a whole glob came. He just grabbed, well, let's see, laughing. And we both just went, oh, this huge thing of hair. And we were like, oh my gosh. I mean, it's just this weird dynamic. But, we tried to have fun with it. We had family pictures. I brought wigs for everybody to wear. I figured let's just have fun. And it was my last family picture with my hair. And then we just all put funny wigs on. And I tried to make it a little more fun for my kids. I tried to teach my grandkids that it was like a superhero that was going to go in and fix me and make me better so that they wouldn't be as scared of the chemo. And it's mentally and emotionally, it's hard.
Well, like, once again, if that doesn't show you Jody's character in such a horrific moment that she is thinking about everyone around her, trying to make this like a positive experience so it's not so
Wow.
victimizing on herself, but she's teaching her kids, her grandkids, that it's okay to go through hard things and do it in a positive perspective. And it's
I wasn't always positive.
yeah, I know,
There were some
but
bad
the
days.
fact that like the day that you're being stripped of like what you said is your womanhood, you're losing your hair, and finding positive outlets is a very unique thing. And
Thank you.
so take us through that time when you lost your hair, and what did
Yeah.
that do to you internally?
Yeah. I had planned on, I'd wanted, I mean, you're saying all this, but I decided that I didn't want it to be, I made a decision that I didn't want it. I knew if I just did it with my husband or with my kids, it was going to be emotional and I was going to have a hard time. So I decided I wanted it to be more fun. So I'd kind of planned a little thing to have a shaving party, but I ended up with some complications with my mastectomy, and so I ended up in the hospital. And during those 6 days, I had to have I had an infection in my surgery. So I had to have I'd had reconstruction. I had to have that taken out. They were very worried about me going septic because the infection was in my body during my chemo, right after my chemo treatment. So it was emergency surgery. So this isn't normal, but that's what happened to me. So I was in the hospital when I really started losing my hair, and I was trying to hold on and I couldn't hold on. It was kind of like a toupee. I'm like, if I touch it, it is going to fall out. So we had a Sunday night shaving party in the hospital at the IMC. And I didn't invite my mom and dad because I knew it would be emotional, because I wanted it to be fun. And they happened to show up. I think God sent them there because my mom deserved to be there. I was her daughter. And it's really funny, the pictures. It's not funny, but it is, because all my kids were laughing. I've got a hoodoo, mohawk and all of this. And then it shows my mom in the background. She's 90 and she has my little hair in her hands and she's crying. And then she's looking at my kids mad, like, why are you laughing at this? And it's this funny, I always say some people call it chaos. We call it family. We're very chaotic. And I thought, if that's not just my family in a picture, it's my family in a picture. But I tried to make it fun. But, then everyone left and Trevor stayed. My oldest stayed. Each one of them did their thing. Like I said, McCall was with me every step of the way. And everyone left and Trevor was there. And he said, Mom, I wrote you a letter. And then we talked for a minute. And then he said, I want to read it to you. And he read me this most beautiful letter. And I always say, if you want to feel loved, get cancer. Because such a sweet connection for him and I to have that moment. During one of my little breaks, not a break from chemo, but when I was feeling good, I went up to Utah State to watch my son play soccer, to San Diego. Actually, we went for 3 days to San Diego, and I got there and his whole college team had pink bands on them that he had surprised me with, and they all wore pink. And it's just those sweet moments that you're like, gosh, the compensation that comes, and connection. So much connection. And I mean, I cannot not talk about the amount of love I received from my neighborhood through Riker and then through this cancer. The food, the gifts, the texts, the love was overwhelming. And I have never felt loved like that. I never knew love like that existed. It almost made the pain worth it. There were times when the pain and the love became interchangeable. I didn't know which I was feeling. It was so beautiful. And if I said anything, I would want to say that. There was one day during grief, I have to share this. I was standing there, not wanting to see anyone. It was right after Riker died, and I was sitting there, and I heard a car pull up, and so I backed up, and I have sliding glass windows, so I just kind of went like this to peek. And one of my friends that was I think she was a dear friend, but not my closest friend, but she had a little pot of flowers. And I saw her get out, and I was hiding behind the curtain so she didn't see me. But I watched her take that pot of flowers, can't even say it, with so much love she was almost reverent as she like slowly just walked by my steps, and she walked up and just set it gently down. And I just watched her, and then I watched her walk back, and I realized at that moment that behind every sandwich or pot of lasagna or flower or gift was a person like her that was truly showing me love. And I looked at every single thing differently. And it honestly, it was just so beautiful. And the same thing with my kids. We had moments that you can't create. Only cancer can create those moments, unfortunately.
Yeah.
They're so tender. I'm so tender. And Bruce, like I said, ask Bruce how good I was. Didn't make it that fun for Bruce. Trust me, the husband got it. But even him, he was a doll. I shaved my head. I got in bed. That first night I came home from the hospital, I was laying in bed, and I put a little scarf on my head, and I thought, well, that's stupid. I'm wearing a scarf to bed. So then I took the scarf off. So then I was just laying in bed. It was my first night home with a shaved head, and I was laying there, and it was the middle of the night, and I felt his arm come around me, and I just kind of started to cry. And all of a sudden I hear, "Where the hell's your hair?" And I love him. I love him. I'm laying here with little tears, and he's like, he all of a sudden, I felt his little hand go like this, and he's like, "Where the hell's your hair?" I love him. And that's what he brought me all the time. He brought me laughter and fun, and it's okay. He didn't care. He does now. He looks back at the pictures now. Now he's like, whoa, wow, wow. So maybe God took it away from him. But anyway.
I think
it's a big, long story. Sorry.
no. There's tons of integration with both of our lives, and like my parents got divorced when I was in, I think, 7th grade, and I remember Bruce and Jody being giant people that stepped in that really made like a positive atmosphere around a harder moment. And for sure that's like one of Bruce's expertise, I think. And like I said in the last podcast, she came over to the house the night that my dad died at like 1:30 in the morning. And a really funny little experience, which is weird to have something like that. But we're all sitting at my brother's house, and we're just like, holy crap, dad just died. Like, what is life right now? And this unique moment, she comes over and she's just like, you guys get it, and it's so bad. And she was just very comforting. And then a couple hours went by, and it was probably 2 or 3 in the morning, and Josh's youngest son, his name is Ren, comes out of his room at like 2 or 3 in the morning, and he's walking to the bathroom, and we're all sitting there like, our dad just died. And he's walking to the bathroom, doesn't say anything. He sees us all, and then he turns around, he's like, I want you guys to know, I hate that you're all here. And then walks in the bathroom.
That
and
was so funny.
We are at like 0% life energy of anything. And it was the greatest funny moment and a horrific moment that I'll probably ever experience in my life. And then he just went to the bathroom and walked back in his room. It was amazing.
That's like somebody sent that. Like, how does how? 2 contradicting emotions like that with this darling, funny, and your dad was funny.
Oh, yeah.
So, like, I don't know if it was your dad, but like, okay, guys, that's so true.
It was amazing.
It is a little bit like that with my head.
But yeah, I just wanted to give recognition to how amazing, like Bruce in that moment where he's touching your head says that he's like showing up in his form.
Yeah.
And Bruce and you showed up with so many gifts, so many random pop-ins that meant a lot to our family. And it's like, this isn't just another member of someone I know in life, but this is like a special family.
Yeah, it is. And I think that's why your sister showed up for me.
Yeah.
Yeah, so much. Or your mom.
Yeah.
Your mom, for sure. I'm not because I showed up for her, but it's just what it is.
Yeah.
That's
I
sisters.
was
That's
like, are
what
you
sisters
gonna
do.
tell me about a sister
We
I
do.
don't know about?
Sorry. No.
Um,
Yeah. It's family.
yeah.
It is.
And let's go to another. There's a really cool moment that God kind of brought someone to your house in a special moment.
Yeah. So after I got home, after the where the hell's your hair moment, Bruce went to work, and I had not, like I said, I'd had my reconstruction taken off and very, very drastically, and I had shaved my head. So I had not, I hadn't really seen myself, and I was alone. And so it was the moment of truth. My head was shaved, and I stripped down to get in the shower, and I stood there in front of the mirror, and I did not know who that was. And I had thought I had prepared myself kind of for that moment because I'd shaved my head the night before. We'd kind of done it all, but for some reason, it took my breath away, and it was rough. And I thought, this is just part of this journey. I hadn't really said this part of it, but maybe I will. I stood there and I said, God above, like Riker died. I said this in the mirror, and I said, Riker died. You took everything from me physically. You took everything from me emotionally. I wasn't yelling, and I wasn't angry, but I was like, really? Like you took everything from me. My child, it's the worst. And then and now, really? I was just like, really? This is you're taking this much physically from me? It was just not good. And I thought, I don't know what to do with this. And I just stood there going, I'm not doing well. And I thought, okay, I'm just going to get in the shower and process this. So I got in the shower, and the whole time I thought, what am I going to do? I can either never look at myself in the mirror for the next year, or I can get out and face it and figure out what the heck I'm going to do with it and mentally use some mindfulness and try to work through it. So I was processing in the shower, and I was crying, and I'd had that little moment, kind of angry, like, God, this is a lot. It's too much. I just kept saying, I'm not going to do this. I can't do it. This is ridiculous. And then the other moment I thought, it does match how I feel on the inside, though. I finally look on the outside. I thought everyone in grief should look like this, because then they'd walk around and people would really feel bad for me. You know how in different countries they all wear black for a year? I thought, yeah, walk around like this. And because I just thought, wow, this is exactly how I felt and I feel. And it was just a lot. Anyway, so I got out of the shower, and I just stood there, and I leaned in really close to the mirror. I thought, I cannot find myself. And so I just leaned in really close to where I could just see my eyes. And I just thought, there you are. I found you. And you're there. You're in there. And I just sat there. I thought, I don't know if I can stay here forever, but I stayed there for moments and thought, okay, I'm good. Came back out, put my robe on, and I started to feel it again, just like, oh my gosh, I cannot do this. And I just didn't want to have a wave of grief, crying. And so I just looked up and said, Heavenly Father above, I have got to have some help. I cannot do this. I need someone, and I need someone right now. And I said that out loud, looking up. And right then I heard a knock, and then the door opened, and it was my brother. And he said, hey, sis. It was so the timing again when God signs his name. I looked up, and I'm like, I just laughed. I was like, really? I said, Mike. And he said, hey. And, he didn't know where I was at that time. He just knew I'd shaved my head the day before. And he said, I just came to see you. And I said, okay. And I cinched the robe up, and I just looked up, and I went, my brother sent my brother. And I knew that he had done that for me. And I came around the corner, and my brother was sitting there with a bouquet of flowers and a watermelon. And I said, Mike. And he said, you're beautiful. And, you know, you can't, like I said, you can't create that moment. That comes from cancer. And it was the sweetest moment with my brother, and he didn't know what the heck to do. He's just like, I'm like, you think this is bad? You got to see this. But I'm going to show you. But I'm just saying, it's not good. It was not good. Sorry, TMI for you. But anyway, yeah, that was a moment. It's one of my most special moments during cancer because God answered my prayer. And I needed it at that moment. And you know what? From that moment on, I can honestly say, truly, I was able to let it go. I was able to let it go.
Why?
I had a moment. I don't know. I don't know why, whether it was just the come to Jesus moment and I got through it and I just was able to let the physical part of it go. I mean, not totally, but I never really had a huge problem with that anymore. It's just part of the process. Getting better.
Yeah. Okay. With anything, any hard trial, there's always giant cons to them, but there's these subtle pros that can be life altering. Like that moment you had with your brother, that's divine. You're literally at the lowest I've heard you ever talk about, right? Yeah. And then God just sends you his saving moments, right?
How does he do that? How does he do that at that exact moment? It's so cool.
So what have been some of the pros that you were not expecting with cancer?
Learning to be still with myself. I had created solitude after Riker. I wanted the solitude. Cancer at first made me feel isolated. Like, no, wait, I'm ready to get out now. Hold on. I'm back in the bed. I'm back on the couch. Holy moly. But so many moments of laying on my couch and literally watching the seasons change. I have big windows in my living room and to watch the snow and then to watch or the fall and to lay there and have people out raking my leaves in the fall and hearing them do that. And then to see the snow, the stillness, I learned to not feel isolated, but to try to appreciate the stillness. When my body was bad, my mind was bad. As soon as my body began to heal, my mind would begin to have clarity and heal. It was hard when your body isn't well, your mind doesn't do well. But I feel like that was a pro. I really felt strongly about that. A story that I think is the biggest that would explain this. The last day of chemo, my kids all came. I rang the bell. It's a big deal. We decided to go out to a restaurant to Market Street Grill, and we had to make reservations. So they couldn't get us in for an hour. And so Bruce went on. So we were talking, and Trevor said, hey, let's go to Ross. And Cooper goes, yeah. And I said, I want to go to Ross. Like that. Because I'm dramatic. And Trevor's like, you act like I said I'm going to Hawaii. And I was like, I know, but I want to go to Ross because, it's my last chemo. I was like, this is my last chemo. Okay. And he's like, okay, you can come, like, cool. So Dan and McCall and the kids and Bruce went to the restaurant and they were just going to wait there. And me and Trevor and Cooper pulled in the parking lot of Ross. And they jumped out and ran in. And I was like doing this thing like, I'm at Ross, I just had my last chemo. I don't have to go there ever again. Oh, I'm so happy. And I was happy. And oh my gosh. And I opened the door. Sorry. I opened the door and I was like, I had the thought, do you really want to go to Ross? And all of a sudden I just went, oh gosh, I don't know if I want to go to Ross. Seems so stupid. And I thought, oh my gosh. And I shut the door and I was like, this truck feels like a holy place all of a sudden. And I felt like Ross wasn't and the truck was. And I just sat there and all of a sudden, and I don't say this in any way of, I just know this is what happened. I just thought, this truck feels like a holy place. And then the thought came, no, you're the holy place. Mm-hmm. And I was like, oh, that's not me. That came from 2 years of maybe being still and learning to sit in the quiet and honor the quiet. And at that moment, I recognized the holiness and that God had given me a chance to meet him and Jesus in a different place. And through that process, I had become holier in that moment. I went to Ross later, not that day, but that goes away a little bit. But in that moment, I felt like, oh, this is a pretty cool, amazing experience that God has provided me to experience grief in its rawness and its emotional pain, and then to experience physical pain in cancer and chemo, and to combine those two together is really an amazing experience for someone if they can look at it with their elevated eyes.
Yeah.
Which, you don't always do. And I don't always do it still. And I don't ever want to do it again. But for that little moment, I was able to recognize the blessing that God had given me in that. And I think about that a lot.
I want to share something that correlates with this. And you're once again involved in it. It's one of my most spiritual days of my life. And I'll be a little brief. I was going to the gym in the morning, just like any other day, and I don't ever take pre-workout, but I did this day, and I just went on my way, and I turned left out of my neighborhood, and I see a car pulled over, and then I see the person running, and so I see someone laying on the ground, and I pull over. I'm like, okay, well, I just want to see if there's anything I can do. And so then I pull over and I get out of the car and I hear this guy talking on the phone, and it sounds like he's talking to the police or someone. And he's like, hey, I just hit someone with my car and they're on the ground. And so we're both running up to him. He doesn't know how to approach the body or anything, and then I've done some things prior that I wanted to stabilize the head and just put my hands under, and this body kind of looks like it's a little mangled and they're not breathing, and I take the pulse, they're not breathing, and I just holding this head, and it's a person that is not there in that moment. And about 30 seconds goes by. A couple more people pull over, and out of nowhere, the body just starts wheezing. And sorry, I won't get in much detail, but then some ambulances came and kind of took over from that moment. And there were so many reasons that I was supposed to be there in that exact moment. Yeah. And I ended up talking to a guy across the street that saw it. We had the most spiritual God experience where we needed to talk to each other in that exact moment. And then I was like, okay, I go to the gym, and I almost pass out at the gym. I just try and like keep going with my day. And I just literally held a dead body. And
yeah.
It's kind of crazy.
Then you go to the gym.
Yeah. God,
trauma.
Stupid. But anyways, I almost pass out. And then I think of your story about that girl that sat there with Riker. Uh-huh. And I realized what an impact that is to your full circle experience. And so I leave the gym and I run to my car. I run back to the scene. It's totally taped off. And the ambulance had left, and it's now like a crime scene, right? You don't know. And so they must have passed. And so I just go under the ropes, and I'm like, hey, I was here at the crime scene. I need you to take down my information and everything because I want to be that person that helps give them closure, knowing that I was there for their last breaths.
Oh.
And that wouldn't have happened, and I wouldn't have cared to that extent if it wasn't for your story.
Yeah, that's crazy.
Yeah.
Isn't that? And Jasmine would say you were appointed to be there.
Yeah. And the amount of things that led up to that prior, it really was. And so I went to the hospital after that, and I'm running in the hospital just looking for this family or whatever. Didn't find them. But I had this day of holiness, like what you're talking about, through such a tragic experience. And what made me think about it is you didn't want this spiritual experience to leave when you were going to Ross, right?
Yeah, exactly.
And so after the hospital, after the crime scene, everything, I just drove to the temple and I sat there for like 6 hours because the spirit was so close that entire day that it was altering my internal spirit, and that temple that you grew internally through years, I felt closer to that than I ever had. And it was just one of those life altering moments that started with something horrific. The night before, the girl I was dating and we were saying a prayer, and I prayed to be an instrument, like a little thing.
In someone's life.
And he's like, all right, I'm going to take that and run with it. Oh. And
wow. That's exactly it. That's exactly it. And you can't live in that forever because we live here. I mean, you can to some extent, but you realize that
you just don't want to leave.
That it's a holy place for a minute. Definitely. That's cool, Jaxon. That's an amazing. You need to write that down.
Oh, I did. I wrote everything about it down. Yeah. And but back to your world.
Yeah. So anyway, there we go.
Let's go to the ringing of the bell. Like what that meant to you.
Yeah, it was.
And what is that?
Yeah, you ring at the end of your chemo treatments or at the end of your cancer journey. Sometimes you ring it after radiation and after chemo. You get to ring the bell, and there's a little thing that says celebrate, and it's just kind of an ending for you, and it's emotional. The nurses gather around, and I've always said that bell was not just for me. That bell is significant for all those oncologists and pharmacists and researchers and all of the people that are in the cancer world. I think when a cancer patient rings the bell, it's for all of them, and they feel it, and it brings them joy and a feeling of purpose and worthwhileness. But I also know that the next group of cancer people, they come in 2 weeks. There's a new group, and I sometimes wonder if those people really realize the transformation, because you are transformed during that time physically. Your hair comes back and things come back, but the same process physically that happens, there's a transformation that comes through, because you're close to, by the grace of God, I wasn't stage 4, and even if I was, some people hang on to stage 4 for a long time, but a lot of people die. I told Jaxon just an hour or so ago that a good friend of mine just died after a mastectomy, and so it's really hard. There is such a thing as survivor guilt, and there is a lot to process there. Why her? Why not me? And I'm a survivor, and fight, Jody, and you do all those, you say all those things, but then you realize that it's cancer and it's in the hand of God. And so my little word for the phrase for that year was fight with everything you have, but with full surrender. Because especially with cancer, you can be as in charge as you want, and you can try as hard as you want, and sometimes you get recurrence, and sometimes it's not going to happen to me, because I'm not going down that way, but I am, by the grace of God. You fight, and then you also recognize that there's they see a lot of things. Those and so I love them, but I am so grateful to just have new lenses to look at life through. I had some people say, I was afraid when you got cancer that you might just want to die and go to Riker, because my grief was intense. And I thought, are you kidding me? Have you seen my children here? They need me here a lot more. Riker's fine. I'm fine with him. I'm good. I believe he's fine. I'm not, it gave me an acceptance of, well, I don't want to die. I don't, I love you, but I'm down here and I want to fight to be here. And I also made me really want to see everything and enjoy everything. And I have a totally different outlook on life. It's just different. Everything is different. Tuesdays are different, reading a book is different. Making food sometimes is different. It was like after Riker, sometimes it's different for a hard reason and it triggers you to cry and it triggers you with a wave. And then other times cooking a certain meal feels, the gratitude is something I never knew I could experience or even feel. It's cancer,
Yeah.
It's not a good word.
Well, as horrible as it is, it sounds like it's also brought you a taste of greatness to your life on a deeper level. That at no point is it like what you want, but the will that God has for you has helped you become, this soldier on earth to who knows what does that all entail, but it's built you into this woman that is full of power and a leader and a light for others. It's so
That's
cool.
nice. Well, you're nice. I'm not always a light, but I'm trying. I'm annoyed sometimes. There's cancer aftermaths. Like I have neuropathy, and there's things in your body that's annoying, and there's times then I feel guilty for being annoyed, and so you have to process that. There's a lot of processing, a lot of layers, but I think there's a lot of layers with every trial. I don't think it's any different, like I've said, than hard challenges that everyone goes through. Maybe it's marital problems for 20 years. Maybe it's addiction. Maybe it's bankruptcy and financial problems. And, I have found that a lot of people with real problems, they're a long time. It lasts a long time. And so I'm grateful for my experience the last 5 years. I'm grateful where I am. I don't know what it means for the future for me. We're taking it one day at a time.
So how long have you been cancer free?
4.5 years.
4.5 years now.
Yeah. So in October it's 5. And with my kind of cancer, 5 years is a big milestone. Your percentage for recurrence goes down. You have to take these ugly drugs for 5 years that causes all kinds of havoc on your body. I have osteoporosis now. That's fun for my age, but which do you want?
Give and take.
Give and take. There's a lot of that. There's a lot of that in this. But yeah, 4.5 years. So at 5 years, it goes down a little bit. So we hang on till 5 years. That's a big one. And I'm thrilled. Can't wait.
To wrap everything up, last question. Someone starting a grief journey or a cancer journey, how would you be their friend? Like, how would you show up as a friend? A friend of wisdom that's experienced it.
I feel like it's easy in the grief story because I didn't know how to show. I knew how to show up like that girl. She brought that flower. I saw when I opened my fridge a week after Riker died and I saw it full of food. I hadn't even noticed the food for a week. When I opened it, I was all of a sudden hungry. It'd been a week. And I'm like, I'm hungry. And I opened the door. I gasped. It took my breath away. I hadn't even noticed the food coming in. I would say in both of those things, well, how to show up for someone with cancer or with grief, I would say you just show up with the plant, with the gift, whatever it is. Showing up matters. For a moment, I'd open the door and I'd see something, and it took that pain away, and it mattered. And I realized, oh my gosh, it matters. These things matter. But on a deeper level, to show up for someone with grief, I think healing needs a witness. And I think the best way to show up is to allow someone to grieve. People have a hard time holding space for such sadness. They don't know what to say. They don't know what to do. It's hard. I don't know what to say still. I don't know. And whatever, trust me, people say something, it's wrong. When you're in a bad spot, that's why everyone says, sorry for your loss. So sorry for your loss. Because, I don't want to say anything. Don't tell me he's in a better place. If you're in a weird place, that is not what I want to hear. Or, and so I feel sorry for people. People would say, I can't imagine. And I'd say, you can't. It's because you can't imagine the pain. I feel sorry for some people that I would say terrible things to, when they were just trying. And so I'm saying, just say something. Say you're sorry. Say you don't understand what that pain feels like. But allow them the grief and just sit with them. Call someone and say, I'll take your kids, or I'll just sit with you, or whatever. But I think that would be my advice, is to actually allow the grief. Cancer, I think everything everyone did at cancer was amazing. Cancer just brought connection to me. The fun part of it, I had a friend that made shirts, and they all wore them on my chemo days. My high school friends wore these stupid darling shirts, and on Tuesdays they would send me a snapshot of them in their Jody's Journey shirts on my chemo day. They remembered. Like, what? That's cool. One girl took a pair of shoes and wrote all my favorite sayings and things on these shoes for me to wear, or a bracelet. Just those things, they really matter. And so I would just say, show up, do something. And it's overwhelming. And don't do anything for me anymore, because I've had enough love. But for other people, I would say that, yeah, for sure.
Yeah. The power of being someone that is a support in someone else's worst moments of their life is such a blessing for the person going through their traumas and their trials. Yeah. And my advice, be as proactive as you can, and kind of ask how would you like me to show up, instead of
what can I do for you?
Yeah.
It's different when you say, how can I show up for you now? What do you?
Because everyone will say, like, hey, anything you need, just let me know. And it's like, well, I probably won't let you know.
I know.
But if you were to ask, how can I show up for you?
Yeah.
Then I'd give a genuine answer.
Yeah.
And a couple things, like just a weekly, how's it going? You just went through this,
Yeah.
How are you feeling?
Yeah. A funny story. My this is another thing I would tell the griever, or me. I would tell her something different, because my sister-in-law, our other nephew, happened to pass away also 2 years after Riker. And I will never forget this. I text my sister-in-law the day of her son's funeral, and I'd already, I've done this.
Yeah.
And I text her and I said, Laura, today is a rough day. I'm here for you, and I know how hard it is. I'm here for you, honestly, in any way I can be. And she texts me back, I would like an apple. Because it's my sister-in-law, who's adorable. But for me, you want an apple? Oh, you want green, red, Honeycrisp, you name, it was just so, I can get you an apple. And I went, oh my gosh, that's so interesting. I was so grateful that she actually said something that she wanted. And we laugh in our family, because during my talk at the funeral, I was out of my mind, but I said, I need water, random. I went, I need water. And water bottles. At the end of the funeral, there were 10 water bottles that people had rolled down the chapel.
Oh my gosh.
And my kids said, do you know how many people have said, what can we do for your mom? Trust me, you say I need water, you're getting water. Like, it's so cute. And I
Yeah.
think I'm going to be better at that after Laura. Like, I should say, I could really use
Hmm.
something. You're not in your right mind, really.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's a hard one.
Yeah.
It's hard.
Well, um, I think we'll wrap up, and it's been like so cool to be able to sit and talk to you in this moment. We did a documentary together, and she was the first one we ever did,
And it was amazing.
and
A great job. I'm here to promote it. He honestly, it's such a service that you give. It is a beautiful, awesome service that you don't really think you want or need until you really want or need it. And you don't have to be 80 years old. It can be something you've gone through like this. I would have never thought I wanted to do this. And I'm so grateful to have it.
thank you. I appreciate that.
Yeah.
Yeah. As you guys know, her story deserves to be captured, and a lot of people's do. Everyone's story is special in its own way and for their own family. And Jody is just an inspiration to a lot of people, and so we're so grateful to have you. And I'm personally grateful to have you in my life as much as I get you.
I love you.
And I love you too. And that is the Life Legacy Podcast.